Hi guys, I wanted to make a video and I apologize, this is probably going to be a little bit of a long one, but I wanted to make a video because Brianna asked me a question recently and I've been thinking about it a lot. Sorry, my camera is kind of funky. I've been thinking about it a lot and I don't know, probably the speech therapist in me just feels so passionate about just language development in autistic learners, and also really not just their language development, but their like academic progress and the way they learn on a whole. So I'm going to answer her question, but I just wanted to explain why maybe I think some of the information that I've given you might have been confusing. So her question was simple. She asked me to look in Max's notebook and go over some of his social studies and science gestalts and just let her know, like, are these good ones? Are these what you're looking for? And they were great. I liked all of the gestalts, they were fine. But I was also thinking back to a packet of information that she had given on gestalts and gestalt language processing. And that packet had also a lot of really great gestalts listed, and it talks a little bit about gestalt language learners. But the two kinds of gestalts, the ones that I'm asking you guys to do in like math, social studies, and science, are very different from the ones that were listed there. And it really got me thinking that when you have an autistic individual, depending on the stage of language development that they're at, and also depending on the purpose of what you're doing, not only will your gestalts be very, very different, but the way you present those gestalts are going to be very different as well. And in addition to that, what I would do as a speech pathologist, and then what I would ask you guys to do, or parents and family members to do to support a gestalt language learner, that's also going to be very different. So I don't want you to think I'm expecting anybody to be a speech pathologist. You know, what I am sharing, I would share with any family or anybody who wanted to collaborate on just how to support not just language, but like learning in general based on language. Because when you think about it, everything that comes at you, whether it's social studies or science or math or reading, all of the things coming at you are language based. So everything that you learn, even nonverbal language, is language. So this information I think is just good for your clients. Okay, so one quick thing. The reason the gestalts might be different for a kiddo, let's say like Braden versus a kid like Max, is because for a kid like Braden, and I wrote something on a board and then the dog laid on it and it's not legible anymore, but I'm gonna show you anyway. For a kid like Braden who's in the early stages of language expression and development, we would want to be, this is supposed to say over here, growing language naturally. That would be like the primary focus of really everything that I would do with him, and that like families would be supporting him with. Growing functional language naturally. And just because he's a beginning language learner, he's at the beginning stages of language development, I'm not saying or trying to imply cognition wise he's at beginning stages. I think Braden is extremely smart. He's probably off the chart smart, smarter than any of us even realize. And I know he's got a lot of knowledge and a lot of information, but in terms of his output functionally, like functional statements of protest, statements of joy, being able to gain joint attention, declarative statements of what he's thinking, and having that match the actual like objects and vocabulary, for all of that, I would say he's in the early stages of development. So for him, the focus of what I would be doing and how I would suggest for family and teachers to better support him, the gestalts that we would use would be based on what categories of language that we wanted to develop more. So let's say you were doing science with him and you're trying to support his language and you really want him to have more statements of joy. Good gestalts for Braden would be like, science is so much fun, or I really like doing this, or observing the butterfly was cool. Those would be really good gestalts. Now, how we introduce to those gestalts is going to be different than what I would suggest for for someone like Max, because we are growing language naturally, we're not trying to teach scripts. We're not trying to get him to like memorize certain things and repeat them. We're just really trying to support his language development. So in that case, you're not going to repeat your Gestalt 20, 30 times. You're going to present it a couple times and then you're going to move on. As a speech therapist, I would be doing a lot of other things behind the scenes, but that's what I would like suggest for you guys. Now for a kid like Max, Max has a lot of functional language. Even though a lot of it is scripted, he does have statements of joy and he can ask questions and he can share ideas. So as a speech therapist, if I was working with him, I still would be working on this side of the board. I would still be working to grow his language naturally, but simultaneously, I would also now be introducing what's on this side of the board. So sometimes I kind of take my speech therapist hat off and I put more of a teacher hat on. And what I would ask you guys to do, and what I've been asking in terms of like why we want to use Gestalts, is really what you want to do like more as teachers and RBTs. So because over here, we want to get to the top of the pyramid. This is what the pyramid says. On the bottom, we have general knowledge. That's our foundation. Above that, we have like vocabulary, WH questions, inferences, and problem solving. Because we want to get to a point where we can ask Max WH questions and he can give good answers, like we want to really be focusing, like this is huge. This is the biggest part of our pyramid down here is general knowledge. We want to be growing general knowledge. And as we're kind of scaling the pyramid, we don't have to sit on any one level in isolation, but we want to make sure that as we move up, we're like the level underneath it is being supported. So if we're going to ask WH questions, which is up top on science, we want to make sure we've really supported him down here with that science material first. So if we're now working on building general knowledge or concept knowledge, well, now we are going to teach concepts. We're not going to expect Max to grow a concept of density or what the word observation means on his own. We're going to really support him in that general knowledge category, and then we're going to go ask questions later. And because kids, 95% of kids who are autistic really do fall in that Gestalt language learner, because they learn language in chunks, that's why we want to use scripts or Gestalts to teach concepts. And because we are teaching, not just growing naturally, we are going to drill it, and so we're going to pick Gestalts that teach concepts, and we're going to drill them and use those Gestalts 20, 30, 40 times. We're going to use the Gestalts till we're blue in the face, because we do want him to eventually be able to kind of process and use that back out. So I'm just going to give an example now. For science, what would be a good Gestalt for Max? So observing the butterfly was so much fun would not be a good Gestalt, but a good Gestalt would be anything that teaches a concept and that does not contain words he doesn't understand. So a good Gestalt. When we observe, we look at something closely. So that's teaching him what the word observe means. That's the concept we're teaching. And he understands all the words that follow what observe is. So that would be a great Gestalt. Another good Gestalt would be living things need water and sunlight and food, and they grow. That would be a good Gestalt because you're teaching him the concept of this is what a living thing is. An example of maybe not a good Gestalt for Max would be like science is fun, just because he already has statements of joy, so we don't need to teach him that. And then another one would be something that contains a lot of words that he doesn't know. So in science, we observe, we analyze, and we predict. Although that is teaching a concept, which is really good, it's not a Gestalt we want to use because he doesn't know what the words observe, predict, and analyze mean. So it might be teaching him a script, but it's not a functional or meaningful script for him. So anything that we pick as a Gestalt is just going, for Max, is just going to be, because we're functioning with our teacher hat, something that teaches a concept. So I would just kind of consider that. And then your Gestalts don't always have to be super short. Like if you want to teach Max about the past, you could say, the past is something that already happened. Sometimes things happen a little bit ago and sometimes things happen a long time ago. That's a longer Gestalt. But if you follow that up with an activity and you're doing timelines and you're able to show him like what you're talking about in a contextual way, well, now you have an opportunity to repeat your Gestalt over and over, and he's going to make a connection to what you're saying. So with Max, the purpose of the Gestalt is to teach the concept, but then if you're going to do that and build the general knowledge, you have to give him a context in which to kind of practice or to better understand that Gestalt. So for math, like if you want to teach Max that a dime is worth 10 cents, that's an amazing Gestalt because that's a concept we want him to know, but we can't just ask him the question, what is a dime? We have to then, after we gather our data and ask him the question, we have to give him context now. So you want to stop asking questions, and then that is your opportunity to maybe play store or something. That gives you context to repeat your Gestalt over and over and over, and it does it in a meaningful way. So you could have 3 things set up on the table and say, Max, I would like to buy this apple. It costs a dime. A dime is worth 10 cents. And then you could pretend play, and then Max, I would like to buy this banana. This banana costs a dime. A dime is worth 10 cents. And then you would exchange your money and that kind of thing. So the only other thing I really want to put out there about Gestalts and Gestalt language processors, whether you're growing language naturally or you're working on the pyramid over here, more like as a teacher teaching concepts, a lot of research shows using Gestalts is a great way to teach kids, but asking questions can be much more detrimental. So really, no matter where you are in language development for these kids, just asking questions should be done as little as possible. Now, in school, you have to ask questions, and there are some subjects and some activities where the questions are inherent because it's part of what you're doing. So like reading comprehension, you're not testing testing general knowledge. What you're testing is, can they read it and then answer a question about it? So like, let's say he reads something about birds. We're not trying to teach him about birds. We're just seeing, can he read that and then answer a question about what he read? So for that kind of thing, there isn't a lot of like activity-based stuff that you're gonna do. Same thing like if you're doing math computation or you're doing sight words, like there's a lot of things where questions are inevitable and you cannot avoid them, and it's kind of just the nature of what's happening. But if there is any material at all where it is concept-based, questions should only be done with a Gestalt processor to gather data. That's it. So part of the teaching process should not be like leading questions or choice questions or, like sometimes like we'll ask questions and we'll give phonemic cues like, what color is that apple? The apple is, and we're trying to get them to say something, hopefully red, right? But that's not something we want to do. The questions should be for data so we can see, did they learn the concept we're teaching them? Everything else you really want to do through, it could be a worksheet, it could be a tabletop activity, it could be role play, it should be some kind of contextual something where you're using Gestalts to teach them. That's gonna really benefit them the most because that is how they learn. So I just wanna be sure that if we are teaching any concepts, we're just careful not to ask questions and then as soon as the data is collected to be done, because the asking the questions isn't the teaching part, that's really just the data collection. We wanna follow it up with Gestalts. That's why even in math, we can use Gestalts. So math, vocabulary, social studies, science. Honestly, even if you really want Max to internalize like a social emotional type thought or concept, Gestalts are great for all of that, as long as for him, like it's really explained and there aren't words in there that he doesn't understand. Okay, so that's it. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, let me know. And I know this was long, but thank you for watching.